I'm talking today with journalist, firearms expert, and producer of some of the best gun TV ever made, Michael Bain. Welcome back to the network studio, Michael, and thank you for another contribution to our monthly member education journal.
Thank you very much for inviting me again. And as always, it's great to see you. You know, we only see each other at SHOT and NRA.
I know.
We pass like ships in the night.
Well, but the foghorn still works, so, thank you for being here today. This is great. So I was listening, and probably the best kept secret is I'm a big fan of MBTV on the radio, and I was listening to, I think it was last week's segment on shooting matches. And I got to thinking, not only are your opinions informed by decades of shooting a wide variety of matches, but you are one of my generation that still regularly shows up at matches. A lot of us have kind of gotten busy with work and whatnot. So while many of us credit the skills and gun safety habits that we have to participating in shooting sports, not so many of us have your enduring history of match shooting. And so I'm wondering if you could start us out with what got you started shooting competitively and what keeps you going back?
Oh, gosh. It's so long ago, it's really, really hard to remember. But no, I read when I was a kid up through, I read Jeff Cooper and his column in Guns and Ammo. And, so I was at least familiar with, by the mid-'70s, say the '76 Columbia Convention that created the concept of practical shooting.
And you were there, right?
I was not at Columbia, but I was there within a couple of years. I was one of the 8 people that sat at the table that created the United States Practical Shooting Association. And I was lucky enough to be, I worked as a crash test dummy while we put together the concept of the National Range Officer Institute. I worked, Billy Wilson called me and asked me if I would work with him to help get IDPA up and going, IDPA. And I also taught myself in the West and Ken Hackathorn in the East some of the very first safety classes for IDPA. So I was involved in those shooting sports from the ground up, and I love the idea of practical shooting. I just loved it. So as soon as I was living in New York in the late '70s, being a famous rock and roll critic. Yes. I'm with the band. Could you bring the champagne to the table? And, the second show starts at 4 a.m. Good. I want to see that one. But as soon as I moved back to Florida, one of the first things I did was I bought my first 1911. And because Colonel Cooper, I bought a steel Commander, 1911 Commander link steel frame. And I had, about $300 worth of modifications done, which is all the money I had in the world. Had a Smith & Wesson revolver sight, just like the Colonel's. It had, I forget who was making a big upswept beaver tail. And I began shooting matches. And the matches, we called them then, they were combat matches, right? And they were all weird things. I went to the first Florida Invitational combat match and was placed on a squad. I'd had one article in American Handgunner. I was placed on a squad with Tommy Campbell, then at Smith & Wesson, Walt Roush, Jim Cirillo, Jake Jatris, who is it, and all these guys there, and Dave, who started NROI, all these guys. And afterwards, Jake Jatris, who did the combat shooters report, came up to me and said, "Are you busy?" I said, No. And he goes, "You want to go start a new shooting sport?" So what the hell? Let's go. He had a big Cadillac convertible. We rode in, and we went to the Dollhouse, which is a strip joint in Orlando. And we all had yellow pads, and we wrote out what became USPSA. But anyway, so I shot those matches and was very active. And I wrote the first standards for USPSA Limited. And I screwed up really bad. Bill Wilson asked me to do that. He was on the board of directors at USPSA. And I really screwed him up badly because by the time I finished them, we had 38 supers and optics and things. So the world changed while I was working.
Yes.
But so I have this huge amount of time in practical pistol. I spent like 10 years shooting cowboy, which is just fun. I've shot, fill in the blank, shot a lot of 3-gun for a long time.
Hmm.
Shot combat shotgun. I've shot sporting clays. Shot little precision rifle, but that's too much like a religion. You got to sell your car to pay for the tripod.
Yes.
And a friend of mine joined PRS and became serious. And 2 years later, he called me up to tell me he hated me. He's like, I got all these guns. I'm like, never mind. I told you it was going to be expensive. NRL 22, of course, IDPA, and some of the bastard sports. And there's a lot of them. Kind of, this is a specialized match. But I just love to compete. And even now that I'm old and decrepit, I sort of halfway compete. I do a few cowboy matches. Last year, I did ICOR, International Congress of Revolver Enthusiasts. So I shot like ICOR guns. And I love shooting revolvers, and it was a real hoot. Even though I'm down so low, I was hoping that somebody would keel over dead so I wouldn't be in last place. But and I may go back and do that again. And then, gosh, just the other day, my sweetie, said, who's also shot cowboy, shot 3-gun, shot USPSA. And she goes, boy, we haven't shot a USPSA match in a long time, have we?
Yeah.
You know why? This is literally, she goes, a few years ago, we haven't shot a USPSA match in a long time. And I said, you're right, maybe 5 years. And we went to a place, we shot 4, walked on there like, Michael, we're so glad to see you. It's so good to see you back competing. Here's a timer. You take bay 4.
Yeah.
I just,
You're signed.
and they're like, no, you're one of the guys that helped write the rule book. Go take bay 4. But competition is if you think about it, Gila, what we call our culture, gun culture, rests on 3 legs. It's a tripod. And one of those legs is concealed carry, which is a very big leg. The second leg is the training community, which has been driven by concealed carry. And the third is competition. And over the course of time, those 3 legs change balance. Competition was really booming until the world ended at the end of 2019. And all of a sudden, competition tanked. I mean, I stopped going to competition because they still ran some, but you have to wear a mask and like you were banned from picking up expended shell casing because they said it may have COVID cooties on it. I'm like, I'm pretty sure the chamber gets really hot when that explosion takes place. There's a reason those rounds are really hot to touch, but they're like, no exceptions. I don't want to do that, and it hurt competition. Yes. But at the same time, it drove people to train. I think competition is making a comeback. Although the training community, I think you'll agree with me on this, the training community is very ambivalent about competition.
Yes, and that leads me into the next question. So you talked about combat matches, but what's the history of what, I'm going to call it the tension. What is the history of the tension between competitive shooters and pure tacticians?
I'm going to say this harshly. In the early days, the pure tacticians couldn't hit the ground. And that was because, remember, we hadn't been fighting these wars. We didn't have a huge number of vets coming back who had been trained by the military and who had serious battle experience. But we had a lot of people who viewed themselves as there was a split between the gamesman and the martial artist. And a lot of that was facilitated by Colonel Cooper. It's like, oh, I created IPSC, UPS, USPSA, but then they wandered off into the weeds. But a lot of the people who were like saying, we don't believe in that. We teach pure training. It's like, based on what? If nothing else, competition is an experimental medium. I spent $45 on this new widget, and you know what? I DQ'd because the new widget got in the way. But there was always that tension, and I was, oddly enough, starting out, I was a martial artist. I have a black belt in
You are, yes.
I've studied multiple martial arts, and when I went into practical shooting, I was very much on the side of, I am a martial artist. And eventually you get up one morning and go, like, boy, I'm tired of being last. Can I get a compensator on this gun, the 38 Super, and let's just run it. But there's always that tension, and now that tension is exacerbated by the fact that there are zillions of instructors, both for the returning military. There's a lot of guys, and there are a lot of great guys that are, good Lord, how many great military instructors, Kyle Lamba. I got it right, Kyle. I didn't say Kyle Lamb, but, Chris Costa, Travis Haley, so many of those people who have come back who have done landmark work, Kyle Defoe,
Yes.
But for every one of those, there's 50 guys who drove a truck, and they have a really fixed idea. One of my best friends is a guy named Dean Chalker. He's a plank holder in SEAL Six, a plank holder in Red Cell. If you read Richard Marchenko's books on SEAL Team 6, Denny did most of the things that Dick Marchenko said he did. But he's Snake in the books. Well, one day I was out in California talking to Denny, and I said, so, when you're 100% out and you're not doing contract work anymore, are you going to teach? He goes, what am I going to teach, Michael? I can teach you how SEAL Team 6 does it, but it involves hand grenades. Yesterday, there was a headline on the internet from an instructor who's a good instructor, who I know is a really good instructor, and it's like, competition is not training. It's like, can we stop? No,
well, at
it's
least
not
they
training.
are still saying competition will get you killed. That was what was coming out even as much as 10 years ago. Read the media. And I don't think we're hearing that so much anymore. But so I guess what I'm wondering is good tactics and clear thinking under chaotic conditions, is that at odds with or compatible to the procedures that we habituate at matches?
Sure, absolutely. I once talked to an Israeli Special Forces guy, and he is a big champion in Israel on IPSC, and come to the United States and shot USPSA and IDP at a very high level. So I had a question for you, dude. I mean, you shoot people for a living, right? Here's Israeli Special Forces. This is what your job description is.
Yeah.
I said, do you ever have any problem with training scars? He goes, do I look like an idiot to you? He goes, I can tell the difference between a buzzer in my ear and a bullet that goes past it. And he goes, I have techniques that I use when bullets are going past my ear, and I have techniques I use when the buzzer goes off in my ear. He goes, in 20 years of doing this, I've never seen a problem. And again, Jim Cirillo, New York City Steakhouse Squad, your good friend, your and Marty's good friend, was in many ways my mentor, and I love the guy. And I asked him that question because he was just a vicious competitor. And,
he was.
I mean, I used to, whenever I shot big like IDPA matches, Jim would go like, you want to be on the squad? You want to be on the squad? I'm like, yeah, let's be on the squad. And I said, do you ever have any trouble, transitioning between real life and match, what you might call match scars? And he goes, I don't think so. We filmed a thing for Shooting Gallery, and it was an advanced concealed carry class, and there were two groups of students. One group of students were, they trained on their own, but they were very focused. They shot every week. They were very good shooters, but they did not believe in competition. And the other group of shooters were C-class USPSA shooters. And these were advanced drills. They were tricksy drills. They were hard work. And both of them went together evenly. Can they shoot quick? Yeah. Can they draw quick? Do they know how that all works? Yeah. But where they stumbled was what you consider basic gun handling skills. When the group that shot by themselves and shot their own little matches and games, they'd have a jam. They still had to flip an index card in their head and go like, okay, bang. But the C-class USPSA shooters never slowed down. There was never a break because guns jam. And one of the things, if you compete, they break in so many fascinating and different ways. You have to factor that in. And afterwards, I talked to both groups, and they're like, the group who had always shot together going like, they were so fast in clearing jams. They were so fast in have a gun lying on the table, have to access this. And reloading, competitive shooters reload without ever thinking. Even if they're slightly slow, bang.
Yeah. So if we can agree that match competition, we're building automaticity, to use kind of the
Absolutely.
term that Carl Wren taught me. And, those are performance of gun use skills like drawing, reloading, clearing malfunctions. But then the question, I think, becomes what glaring gaps need to be addressed away from competition shooting? And where do we fill those gaps in?
Tactics. Cirillo said this. I'm stealing from Jim again. He goes, you know what the problem with competition is, Michael? I said, no, what? He goes, nobody's shooting at you. And he goes, secondly, they tell you which targets to shoot. Go shoot that one.
Yes.
Go shoot that one 3 times. And that's a dangerous thing. One of the things that we see now later, that we did this a long time, and I'm stealing this from Daryl Bolke.
Okay.
I steal a lot of stuff from Carl Wren, too, because we've been good friends for a long, long time. But the problem with competition scars is when we take the gun out of the holster and point it at the target, we are going to shoot, because they have said 2 shots on each of those targets, 1 shot on the plate. And so we're like, I don't have to think. I've sat there and I've looked at it and I've said, okay, what the hell? I'm going to shoot that way. I'm going to go this way. And there's a danger in it. And the danger is that in the real world, you may have to draw your gun, right? And if you draw your gun to here, let's say you go out and you're a competition shooter, you're prepping the shot. And at the worst time of your life, you're doing the same thing you're doing at competition. The gun comes up. I am pulling the trigger. I'm moving the trigger back to the wall, right? And then as I hit the point here, I'm going to break the wall. I'm going to come back to the trigger. Well, you don't want to do that in the real world unless you're really sure it's the 1% biker gang who's taken over your neighborhood. And one of the things that Daryl has talked about a lot is maybe we need more in training to say, and they do this at gun sight now, since you draw to a low ready. Why do you draw to a low ready? Because you're not pointing the gun at anybody. And one of the things, Carl says, Carl says that Carl Wren says that no more than 1% of shooters ever go beyond the basic concealed carry class.
Yes.
That's a terrifying number. You know?
It is. Our job is clear.
It's get people to go to classes. But at the same time, it's get people to go to classes and don't learn weird stuff. And that's why, and you know this, I strongly have always suggested that people take basic classes from people who know what they're doing. And
imagine that.
Gun sight, you have Thunder Ranch, you have, have Mossad. Those are people who wrote the books, who defined it out. And it's like, I always take a basic pistol class. And they're like, I'm way beyond basic. Sure you are. No. Take a basic pistol class. You're not. And I've taken the Gun Sight 250 class something like 9 times. Because the basics never change.
That's right.
And you always, you more than anything else, you want those basics to be there. But at the same time, the fact that over the course of my competition, and it'd be the same with you guys, and how many times have you drawn the pistol? 1 million times? That's fair.
Competition, yeah.
Sure. I'm practicing, I'm drive practicing, I do all this stuff. If you think, okay, I fired, say, 50,000 rounds, there's probably 350,000 draws behind those rounds to get it to that point. And I see people come out of training where they've had half a day working with a holster, and it's like, you can't draw. You can't, forget the 2.5 seconds line. Forget this line that says you need to be able to bring the gun into play in the 2.5 seconds. Hell, you can't do it in 3 minutes. But think about gun handling. There's no way to get better at gun handling except by handling a gun.
Over and over and over again.
Over and over and over and over and over.
With someone catching when you point it at your hand.
That's right. The advantage of competition is that you are on a range with a safety officer attached to you who is going to make sure you do it right.
Yeah.
And, for that, say your first year in competition, you don't really know that. You read it in the book, well, I don't need to do that. But I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we've done enough instruction. I saw it a lot when I was doing the NSSF media education program.
Mm-hmm.
I had 25 instructors under me that were best in the world. And Todd Jarrett and
Mm-hmm.
Chris Edwards and
Yeah.
fill in the blank. And these are
Mm-hmm.
great people. And we would teach people who hated us to shoot.
Yes.
And one of the things that you notice really quickly is that here's the written thing on safety, and here's the safety brief. You still do this. You still do this.
Yes.
You still do this. It takes a certain amount of time with somebody going, stop. No, we're not going to do. Stop. You're not going to do. Stop. You're not going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Before it's automaticity. Same thing Carl says, John Hearn says, to build up that level of automaticity where I tend to be on the John Farnham side of the world, which is there's no such thing as a safe gun.
Yes.
They're
right.
dangerous things. And we can handle them safely, and we can handle them in such a way that we don't put ourselves and other people at risk. But competition brings in, and you have to practice for competition. You have to do these things at home. So you're getting in this huge amount of, I've got the gun in my hand, I put it over here, I'm doing this. Okay, I have to pick up the gun from a table. So I'm pretending to be asleep, lying on my stomach with my head between my hands.
Yeah.
I have to wake up, move, and access the gun. How do I do that? And all of those things add up. Gun handling to me is it's so much more important sometimes than we reference it in training. When we say you need to be comfortable with the gun, and people go like, it's still a gun. So, yeah, but you still have to be comfortable with it.
Yeah.
You have to be able to manipulate it from here or there. You have to be able to load it safely. You have to be able to unload it safely. You have to know what happens when it doesn't work, which it won't.
Yeah.
I mean, something will happen. It'll
Guaranteed.
Work. And you got to do X. And it both as a competitor and then as a range officer, range master, match director. One of the scariest things I ever did was for IPSC on a world match. And they said, hey, Michael, you are the range master in charge of hopeless cases. Super. What does that mean?
Squad.
He goes,
yes.
You get the people from countries where they don't have safety rules. And he goes, you're going to get them through the match without them shooting themselves. I almost did it. One guy he wasn't on that squad. They didn't give me this guy as a hopeless case, which they should have. He had rigged a Star semi-auto because he's from Spain, where the safety couldn't be engaged because it was faster. And it was fast enough to put a bullet down his leg. It's like, I have my finger on here and it can't engage the safety. Bam! Like, well, it works that way every time, doesn't it?
Yeah. And they actually let that gun in there. But it sort of brings us up to manual of arms and there's specific ways that the guns that we carry work, and there's like ways that competition guns work. And unless I'm mistaken, you're really big in the rimfire competition community. And I mean, the obvious difference is the recoil is so different, but my goodness, the guns many times work differently. I mean, you've got a bolt on a pistol as opposed to a slide, and that's just the beginning of it. You would know much more in depth. So why do you do that? Does your mind actually make that separation that your Israeli friend talked about?
It does. And I'm proud to say that Ken Jorgensen, myself, and the late Nelson Diamond invented the Rimfire Challenge Shooting Association, and we've managed to bring tens of thousands of new competitors in through that window because we created the candy-colored gun 22 craze, and it worked. Funny story, I was at the Rimfire Challenge World Championships last year in October, and one of the kids I filmed, a little kid, he's little. I don't have kids, so I don't reflexively know what age they are. They could be anywhere from 0 to 23. But he was real short. I finally said, so, did you beat your dad? And he goes, every single time. I'm like, cool. I said, so how old are you? He's 11. I said, how long have you been shooting? 3 years. Said, wow. Okay. I watched girls that were kind of like Mean Girls from the movie. They were like high school girls sitting around bitching and talking to each other, and
Mhm.
step up the line and run 7 plates in under 1.2 seconds. Uh, I don't know about you, but I talked with Casey Asubio, fine competitor, about this,
Mhm.
and he goes, "I don't even know what they're seeing. I don't
Mhm.
understand what they're seeing." They had two competitors that shot a 6 plate string in under 1 second. That amount of time
Wow.
is I don't understand. You
Yeah,
know,
that synaptic, that neural speed is something. I don't know about you. I haven't experienced it for many decades, if I ever did.
yeah, I don't think I ever did. I mean, I shot a lot of plates and I never shot that well. But
Yeah.
I think the other thing is one of the reasons I've been a strong proponent myself, and my crazy friend Paul Earhart, who runs the Shooting Wire
Yes.
and editor of the Wires. Paul and I have worked together for 30 years, maybe more.
Hmm.
And we are big fans of people shooting multiple different kinds of disciplines with different kind of guns.
Okay.
Because once again, gun handling requires you to shoot the gun. And one of the things, I think I've joked with you about this, the 22 years I did shooting gallery, and I traveled around the world and shot guns. And invariably, in every country, somebody would come up to me like, "I'm sure you're familiar with this." I'm not totally sure that's a gun. It's like, well,
Yeah.
how much experience have you had on folding Polish submachine guns? I'm a little light on that. But it's always kind of,
Yeah.
but the focus is, as Paul and I have talked about this, the focus is everything has a trigger,
Mhm.
and everything has some way of cocking. And so
Okay.
you try to focus on the commonality of the guns and work outward from there. Um, when I went to Bill Rogers School, Rogers Shooting School,
Mhm.
and it's
Yes.
easily the hardest shooting school in the country. It's a nightmare. And Bill, old friend, but
Mhm.
one of the things that Bill emphasized, and Andy Langley, who was working with him, who eventually became a yoga instructor in Guatemala City, and to the best of my knowledge, was the only American who ever killed a Russian in the entire Cold War. But it's a whole other story. But they would say everything is common. It's common. It's a commonality.
Hmm.
And we were taught, I was taught back in the old days, is, we'd ride the trigger, sit to reset, click. That's how he did it.
Mhm.
That's how he did it.
Mhm. Mhm.
And
We
Bill
did.
Rogers said, "I will break you with that if it kills you." And he goes,
Wow.
"If I have to strangle you, you will walk out of this course and never ride a trigger again." And I said, "Why?" And he goes, "Commonality of all firearms." He goes, "There's some don't
Uh-huh.
work to reset." He goes, "If I hand you a Thompson submachine gun, it doesn't work the same way as your pistol. If I hand you an MP5,
True.
it doesn't work the same way as the Thompson or
True.
your pistol." And he goes, "What you need to have is the ability to shoot anything." And so
Oh
that was
my.
when I'm handed some weird ass gun in the middle of the Israeli desert. And you're like, "Hey, what do you think of this?" I don't do a lot of belt feds, but it's like there's a commonality. There's a commonality. They have to be loaded. There's a trigger that makes them fire, and there's a way to cock it to set the mechanism in. Same thing. I went through the
Mhm.
Russian weapons familiarization course, the East Bloc weapon familiarization course at
Right.
Gunsight. And it's like, oh, you
Mhm.
got to do this, and oh, you got to do this, and you got to do this, and
Mhm.
here's a different gun. But there is a commonality, and you more than anything else, you want to see the commonality. It's one of the reasons I
Mhm.
drift back and forth between sports. It's like this.
Mhm.
I really love shooting revolvers. I
Yeah.
like shooting. I understand the drawbacks to them, all those things. And then, when I went out to the range like yesterday, day before, shoot a bunch of 9mm striker guns,
Mhm.
and I realized that maybe the first 20 rounds, I might as well just pitch them up in the air. It took a second to go like, focus, Michael, for God's sakes, this is how this works. And the more you shoot different guns, the more, I'm actually considering this as a joke because I'm old, but I've actually considered going back to carrying a 1911, which is where I started. So
Mhm.
I thought that would be kind of neat. If you look at some of the current generation of 9mm 1911s,
Mhm.
uh, I have a Thesis 9mm 1911 and a Ruger 9mm 1911,
Mm-hmm.
both of which run Ed Brown internals. It's really nice to have sponsors like Ed Brown. Hey,
Yes, indeed.
I need to buy some stuff cheap, right? But I thought, it's interesting. You come back to it, and then you shoot it. Competition allows you a way to do that, and you're not completely insane. I mean, but I look at IPSC right now. Look at USPSA. What's a USPSA race gun? What's it cost?
3,000 or 4,000. I don't know.
4,000 to ante. That's
Really?
what you got to go to.
My goodness.
$4,000 is a lot of money.
Yeah.
I shot a Wilson gun in competition seriously, and I had maybe 1,800. But you look at a Staccato at maybe 3,700, or you look at the custom built Atlas, or a Nighthawk, and you're looking at $4,000, $5,000 guns. And then you have to buy magazines that are special for those guns. They cost between $79 and $125 each, and they have the fragility of an eggshell at Easter.
Yes.
I shot STI last time I went through a big competition phase with USPSA, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago. I shot STI, and I dropped those $150 magazines, boom, bounce them off the ground, and you're like, I guess I need to get a new, magazine. To Colorado band them, and then we work from there.
Well, and we're going to come back to this budget question because I want to address that with you. But even beyond the equipment and the obvious fun that you get out of it, I think that I want to come back to the question of motivation for mere mortals, because if we're not winning, and face it, one competitor is going to be at the top of the list and all the rest of us are going to be down below there. What keeps us lesser mortals going back to matches?
And there have been times when I bitched piteously because I finished bad. I tell Denise, my girlfriend, I'm like, I'm done. I am so friggin' done. And then it turned out I wasn't done. But I have to remember more than anything else with competition, and this to me is critical. I mean, I spent a certain amount of years in high-risk sports. I spent a certain amount of time doing things that if I made the wrong decision, I didn't get to come home. In some cases, you can make the right decision. Yeah. That was a major learning experience for me, is that stress has to be dealt with. You can say I'm stress-free or I don't have any fears or anything like that, but it has to be dealt with. And the only way that I've ever understood how to deal with it is to be inoculated against it the same way you might be inoculated against smallpox. You're given a vaccine of cowpox, which is a muted down smallpox. And because you get this little vaccine, you get a little of it. And the next time, you're like, oh, I kind of know how this works. It was critical, and we've talked about this before, in doing Over the Edge and being involved with high-risk sports. A lot of the mental techniques that I had been taught in shooting and largely ignored turned out to be critically important. Because sometimes you really need to be able to do a specific activity very, very specifically. And if somebody is trying to kill you, I would say that would be one of those times. Everything has to work at that exact moment. How do you get it to do that? Anything I can do to inoculate me against stress, that gives you a little baseline. If it's like saying a rock climbing analogy, you go out and climb rocks, and you climb rocks at a really low level. Your dog could scramble up this rock face, but you do that, and then you get harder, and you get harder, and you get harder. Part of that is an increase of skills, which is what training gives you. But the second part of it is your mind goes, well, okay, I haven't fallen yet. So you're able to give yourself a stress inoculation. And I was looking at my desk for a timer. Usually there's a timer on my desk, but a timer in competition will blank your brain. Ding.
Yes.
You get a new shooter, you say, okay, you ready? I'll say this, 5-step draw, hand is turning, I'm going to do this, I do that, I push forward, take the trigger out, beep, where am I? Where's the gun?
Who am I? What is my name?
Wait, I need to go to the bathroom. That stress inoculation is so
Mhm.
critical. So
Mhm.
you've got gun handling. At the
Mhm.
same time, your brain doesn't shut off. The buzzer goes off. Yes, you have to repeat essentially a rehearsed set of activities,
Mhm.
but it's we shot a lot of blind stages in IDPA,
We
and
did. Yeah.
Joyce and I used to argue this with Joyce, Joyce Fowler Wilson, who's head of IDPA, and she goes, "This keeps you from gaming the stage." And I said, "I refer you to Malcolm Gladwell's book Blink."
Blink. Mm.
She goes, "Why?" Said it is totally about how long it takes a human organism to make a snap decision.
Mm.
And she's like, how long? Hundredth of a second. He goes,
Mm.
one of the examples he uses is speed dating, which was a thing back in the 80s, 90s. So you got to spend a minute, 60 seconds with somebody.
Mhm.
And Gladwell started charting stuff, and he goes, by the time the person sat down in the chair, they had already made a decision about
Mhm.
the person sitting across from him. He
Mhm.
also spent time with, and I've actually met some of these men and women, um, art authenticators. And
Mm.
he said that, and I've actually seen this on television. I've never been present with it. A high-end art authenticator, you put a painting on the wall, and they walk into the room, and they go, "It's forgery."
Mhm.
They can't tell you how they got there, but they knew immediately that's a forgery. Come on, and then they move forward, and
Mhm.
it turns out to be. And I told Joyce, I said, it's because we have this ability to really very
Mhm.
quickly analyze situations. It's why we're at the top of the food chain.
Mhm.
We're not here because we have big claws, we run fast, or none of that. We're there because we are a stone cold analyzing engine. Sometimes it
Mhm.
backfires on us with pattern recognition machine. But I said, when you say, okay, you're not going to see the stage until you walk to the box. I said,
Mhm.
my theory to you, my thesis to you, is that by the time I walk 10 steps from Michael Bain, you're up, I take 10 steps, I step into the box, they say load and make ready. I have a plan.
Mhm.
And, it may fall apart in my arms. God knows they have, but I have a plan,
Mhm.
because that plan, okay, I've seen X number of stages. I've built X number of stages. I've run
Mhm.
X number of stages. So it's like, okay, dink, dink. I need to do this. I need to do
Mhm.
this rule. I need to step here. Here's cover. I need to do these things.
So these
Uh,
experiences are almost helping us trust that internal computer, for lack of a better word, that is apparently so capable if we don't get in the way of it.
you have to trust it because in
Yeah.
a really bad moment, you do not have that. And this is John Hearn stuff, but a lot of John
Mhm.
Hearn stuff came from some of my stuff on extreme sports. But there's some of John Hearn stuff. Let's be fair about that.
Mhm.
Um, you're not going to have time. You can't engage your
Mhm.
frontal lobe and say,
Mhm.
"Oh God," it's there was interesting research years and years ago. You remember when the two big jumbo jets crashed together in the Canary Islands and they
Mhm.
caught on fire and a lot of people died. And the question was, you're on the ground. The
Mhm.
fire isn't burning rapidly, crazy, out of control. Why are you dead? And the answer is that back then, pre-internet, it was like, okay, you need to have an index card in your head programmed on a reaction. Because if you don't, you're
Mhm.
going to sit there going like, should I stand up? Should I stay here? Should I go there? Should I go
Mhm.
front? Should I go back? So that's why, after that research, you see these idiot things when they go, in the event of a loss of oxygen, put this
Mhm.
in, and exit lights will come on and you will move to those, and you're going like, any idiot knows that. No, as a matter of fact, they didn't.
Mhm.
If you don't have
Yeah.
it in your head, you can't perform it.
Mhm.
Um, one of the really rare times, because I'm not a cop, I'm not any of those
Mhm.
things, but one of the rare times that I've ever put a gun in somebody's face, um, the joke is I'd been at the National Tactical Invitationals, and in the course of 3 days of filming, I ran something like 25 or 30 convenience store robberies. I was the crook, I was the clerk, I was the innocent bystander,
Mhm.
over and over and over. I get home, driving in, and Denise, my girlfriend, says, I'm going to run into the liquor store in little towns, one little thing. You run to the grocery store and get some milk. I'll run to the liquor store and get some beer. I'm like, cool. Stepped into, in the mountains, you have sort of like airlock doors because it gets down below zero. So I step in, the door closed behind me, a really biker guy and two really biker girls. He stands up, he grins, he drops his hand into his jacket like that. And I'm like, crap, this is like number 8 we filmed. Good grief. And so I dropped my hand into my jacket. And loudest sound I'd ever heard was safety came off the little bitty 1911. Click. And the guy looks at me and he's like this, and he goes, I need you to tell me what to do to stay alive. So, okay, now let's be clear. You lost. If you do anything I don't tell you to do, I'm going to shoot you in the face. And the women are screaming. And he goes, what should I do? I said, tell them to be quiet. But anyway, I went through the whole thing, put him on the floor and everything like that. But it was because, once again, pattern recognition, which sometimes can fail us, but how many times have we drawn? How many times have we drawn the gun? How many times have we drawn the gun from concealment, from here, from appendix? How many times have we done that? We have ingrained a recognition of a pattern. I can go into cases where it's screwed up law enforcement, where they shot somebody who shouldn't, because that person goes, I've got a gun. What's that? It's motion consistent with a draw. That's how you get shot. But you have the patterns. And where did you learn those patterns? You know, when I see somebody do, or I see those things, I'm like, you know, this is pattern recognition, and I have to move now. Like in that case, once I recognized the pattern, his hand dropped into his jacket. There was no choice. I had to move.
Yeah.
And only it wasn't the first time he'd seen a gun pointed at him.
I get it.
And so that's why he was like, okay, it's not good.
Yeah.
But again, the only way to get fluid in a draw is to practice drawing. And you're like, okay, I do that every day. I do it 25 times in the morning. I've done it 1 million times. You know, half a million times. You know, I've done it from appendix. I've done it from 3 o'clock. I've done it from cross draw. I've done it from shoulder holster. You know, it's not only do I have those motions, and I'm not a great super draw. I'm okay, but I understand the pattern recognition in those. A lot of I think what we get from training that you do not get from competition shooting is that you get pattern recognition. John Hearn's class, by the way, you know, who lives, who dies, why, is really great that way. Because you what are the factors that make it more likely that you'll come out of the situation? And one of them is how quickly do you recognize the threat? In other words, minimize lag time. You know, in a lot of ways it's good. I wish competition had multiple different starts, because with the rare students that I have, I use multiple different starts. We'll use a timer. We'll, you know, up, gun sight command, up, you know, shoot, hey, something. Even a blinking light. I think John Murphy has used light as in John Murphy's class. It's like, if the light's green, draw. If the light's red, don't. So there's a determination factor in there. You've got to say, okay, pattern recognition. What's a red light? Or, and you know, again, I mean, whatever one might think about Rob Pincus, Rob Pincus's intuitive defensive shooting is hard, because he will force you to think before you shoot. And I believe, and have said over and over and over, even to you, said you cannot shoot faster than you think. And it doesn't matter how good your splits are. You are limited by the fact that you recognize the threat as a threat and then complete the actions you do to minimize the threat. You say, oh, yeah, but I got an incredible split. So what?
Yeah.
You know, in fact, if you practice doing 3 shots, bang, 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 all I do is I do the fast drill, right? 2 in the head, reload.
Yeah, do a bill drill.
Bing, 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 bing. Or bill drill. How fast can I do this? Bang, 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 bang. That's not necessarily going to do you any good, because it's yes, it shows how fast you are, and yes, it works on your gun handling, but it comes back to why you might want to draw to low ready.
Yeah.
because it's so easy to screw up.
Yeah.
And the one thing,
Yeah.
I mean, you learn that in competition. You got
Hmm.
everything planned, and then where am I? I need to go to the bathroom. I think I left my car unlocked. Can I leave? I mean, take the gun. Really, I don't care. Finish the stage. But you learn that things screw up, and you have to
Hmm.
assume that in real life things will screw up.
Yeah.
Um, and
Yeah.
I
You
do
better get ready
strong.
for that chaos.
And Mickey Schutz, who's a good friend of mine, and recently he's been writing more, and one of the because he feels real strongly, the same as I. What is the purpose of a civilian defender? It's break contact. I'm
Hmm.
not arresting you. I
Yeah.
said, in fact, I went through that when I had the guy on the ground. I went and got the
Yeah.
police, and they said, "There's a guy on the ground. Did you check him for guns?" I said, "Do I look like a cop to you?"
Oh.
I didn't do anything. I got him on the ground. I got Denise away because
Hmm.
that's my
Yeah.
job. And they said,
Yeah.
"What about the people in the grocery store?" I said, "Are any of them married to me? Are they relatives?" No, they can
Yeah.
all have a gun just like me. But the key thing I want to do is break contact.
Yeah.
And Mickey's talked about that a lot in his postings on Facebook. He's gone, "Hey, you know what you want to do? Go home.
Yeah.
If you can go home without shooting somebody." And I think more than anything else, and this is John Shaw said this years ago when we started working on that first book, is that training buys you time.
Hmm.
And by buying you time, then you may see an opportunity. Early Andrew Branca's book, his very first
Hmm.
red covered book, which was,
I have one.
yeah, I do too, and was like, hey, as this event goes along the chain, right? There's a tree structure, so every
Hmm.
decision
Hmm.
leads to the tree. Do you have a branch that says go home?
Yeah.
Do you have a branch that says run? Do you have a branch that says
Hmm.
break contact? Because you should.
Hmm. Hmm.
I was glad to see Mickey talking about that. It's like, hey,
Hmm.
hey, hey, you want to go home?
Yeah.
What maximizes that? And if you think about, go back to DB, Daryl Bulkey, draw out a
Hmm.
low ready, that
Hmm.
maximizes your chances of exiting the situation.
Hmm.
Because literally from low ready to bang is what?
Yeah.
Tenth of a second,
Inconsequential.
less than a tenth of a second. It's
Yeah.
inconsequential. Same thing
Yeah.
as police would say, I have to have my finger on the trigger because it takes too long to have it up here. No, it didn't.
Oh Lord.
Timer
No.
didn't lie.
Yeah. Well, exactly. It's all about the use of that time, whether you're going to call it lag time, processing time, getting the most out of that microsecond that you've got to do something. Not to dither, not to stand there, not to freeze, to do something.
And you need to get that kind of programmed into a lot of things you do. I took Denise to New York once. We ran the New York Marathon, which it's actually fun, but later your feet fall off. But I took her down to Chinatown because I wanted to take her to my favorite Chinese restaurant from when I lived in New York City.
Mm.
And we get there about midnight. We stop. The cab stops, and I open the door, and Chinatowns Quiet. And I said to Denise, "Get back in the cab now, cabby. Let's
Yes.
go, 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 go."
Yeah.
We left, and she goes,
Move.
"Why? Why?" I said, "Chinatown's never quiet. Somebody's getting hit, and
Mm-hmm.
somebody got hit. And I don't
Mm-hmm.
want to be in the crowd when somebody gets hit.
No. No.
If things don't seem normal, you can't say, well, maybe it'll clear up in a minute."
No.
Uh, I think we should. I mean, this is another stop you, and I know I talk your ear off, but I've recently become. I recently came to ultimately agree with Colonel Cooper. Is that Colonel Cooper once told me, we're at a gun sight. I was just glance, and Colonel
Mm-hmm.
Cooper said, um, I said, I think you're wrong, Colonel, that you need to hunt. If you want to be a fully well-rounded defensive shooter, you need
A
you need
bold
to hunt.
statement.
And he looks at me and he goes, "You're wrong, Mr. Bain, but it's going to take you a while to figure it out all by yourself." And that's classic Colonel Cooper, right? And years later I did figure. I'm like, wait, oh my God, he's right. And he's partly right because in hunting, something dies.
Mm-hmm.
There's a consequence of your pulling the trigger.
Mm-hmm.
And the second thing is there's the whole gross part associated with it. There's a sound when the bullet hits flesh. And then
Mm-hmm.
eventually you cut this thing up. There's blood everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
There's blood on
You
you.
should clean your own.
Yeah, you should be
Yeah.
aware of all that happening.
Yeah.
But the other thing is that hunting teaches you that there is no time. Because it turns out
Yes.
animals have minds of their own and they can move.
Yeah.
It's like, and how long does it take for an animal to, luckily I've never lost an animal. I've been to Africa 4
That is
times,
very fortunate.
Texas, New Zealand, and I've never lost an animal. One was close, and the other was a 16-hour stalk in the Kalahari Desert.
So you're going to get him.
Follow blood track. Yeah, I mean, no matter what. But it was a learning process. That was my first African hunt. That you can't dawdle.
Yeah. Don't
you come
dither.
up here and you're on the sticks, and you're like, I got an okay side picture, but if I work on it just a little, if I can get a little bit better, bang.
Yeah.
And you have to, because there's too many other, every shot, every situation where there's hunting, a violent situation, anything that involves a small explosion inside a tube is a chaos system. And that means that you can't know how it's going to go, because there's so many factors acting on the system you can't know. So at this point where I say I got an okay side picture, I get this bang. I went hunting down in Texas with my friend Robert Parker, who's been to Africa with me, nilgai hunting last November. And we're like, okay, and I probably did like 10, 15 stalks that didn't pay off. And we finally into shooting light. We did a stalk, and there standing in the field is a nilgai bull looking at another nilgai bull. So his attention is distracted. Chaos system. At this particular point in time, he's not looking for me. He's looking for that other guy who wants his girls.
Yeah.
So literally, there was a old fence falling down. I found a fence post, bang, shot it. And they all told me, they said, my friend Mark Keith, American Rifle, he goes, you're going to have to track it, because those things are incredible. Even if a clean heart shot's going to run several hundred yards into the brush, into the mesquite, you're going to have a really sucky evening. So bang, and it was a clean heart shot, punched through. And then I saw his legs bunch. And as I saw through the scope, I saw his legs bunch. I said, well, crap, he's going to run. And as soon as he pushed off, I shot him right behind the ear, bang, and he fell down. And the PH goes, did you just shoot a nilgai on the run behind the ear? I said, yeah, I did. That's why. I said, didn't want to track him.
Yeah.
And all those decisions had to be made in a very short, and the question is, can I make that shot? Yeah. It's a sporting clay shot. It's not a rifle shot. It's a moving target, small, round.
That's right.
Target. What do you have to do? Swing through the moving target. Exactly the same. Those skills that come from competition translate into real world. You know when to go from, I'm right on, so on my scope, to, I got to swing the gun. I got to swing the gun past the animal. I got to keep moving, because the bullet is going to be in the barrel. So we got to do this.
Yeah.
But I wish it always worked that way. But several of my PHs have made a point. They said, you shoot quick. So I'm gun sight trained. I mean, this is what, 20 years ago.
But there's that decisiveness. There's that belief that you know what to look for and you act on it. And that can be a real hard one lesson. Not all of us have it.
You know how to cure that? Competition will cure it.
There you go.
Because you've got a structured situation.
Yeah.
And when you go like bang, and the 50-yard popper doesn't move. Well, typically what you'll see in a competition shooter is bang, bang. Why that? Because they picked up the fact that the 50-yard popper didn't move quickly.
Yeah.
They saw that very, very quickly. If you watch a YPSC match or SEAL Challenge match, where you see a pickup shot so fast, you're like, I don't understand how they pick that shot up so quickly. Part of it is they know what a good shot felt like
Yes.
because in thousands of rounds of competition, is that a good shot? Yeah, yeah.
Felt off.
That that
Hmm.
shot. But if a shot feels off, instead of saying, "Let me look at the target," Can I go check? Instead it's like
Yeah.
bang bang.
Yeah. Clean it.
But you have to have a lot of shots until you get to a point where you're like,
Hmm.
at gunsight they make me call my shots. Where's the shot?
Hmm. Hmm.
It's like turn around, turn away from the target, guns in the holster,
Hmm.
turn away from the target, tell me where the bullet went.
Yeah.
And
Well, I
it's like,
leaned on it a little. Yeah.
yeah. So I think it's a crappy shot. I'm gonna
Hmm.
go like, three, a little bit right. And they go, look,
Yeah.
and then they come back and tell you, like, you're wrong, you idiot. Uh, it's like long
but
range
but
shooting.
they tell you how to understand what you didn't understand at the moment that
Right.
you
Okay,
did, and
now
that's really the important thing.
let's understand what you did wrong and why
Yeah.
you didn't notice it. It's kind of like
Yeah.
a long range
Yeah.
shooting. FTW range, working with Doug Pritchard, dog, team member, sniper instructor, sniper on the ground. And I'm shooting an 800-yard target. I missed. He goes, what the hell did you make your wind call off of, Michael? I said, the grass. The grass was moving. He goes, well, no wonder. He goes, you should have made the call off the Mirage. He goes, you telling me to make calls off Ghost? Is the only thing that works. It's like you look in, you kind of close your eyes and you open them real quick, you'll see the Mirage. And the Mirage is more sensitive to the wind than the grass.
Wow. Well, there's some been there, done that knowledge. It also speaks to why you shoot the different kinds of competition. I think that I've sometimes learned more about myself behind a pistol shooting a rifle. And I know that sounds a little strange, but there are crossover gifts that for some reason I was receptive to that lesson that I needed to learn on the system that maybe I didn't feel quite so intimate with.
I think that's a very good observation. The rifle demands stuff from you that the pistol doesn't.
Oh Lord,
And
yes.
the shotgun demands stuff from you that I've never been able to understand. For years, once a year, I'd go shoot sporting clays with Larry Potterfield, master clay shooter.
Yeah.
And every year I was like, crap, right? Bam, bam. And every year Larry would come out and bring me another gun that was increasingly expensive. And he'd go like, here, try this one. And finally, try this Holland, Michael, which costs more than your car and probably your house.
Yes.
And I finally said, Larry, it's not the gun. No matter how perfect the gun, Holland is perfect. It's me. It's Mr. Doofus on the clay pigeons, But I like those lessons. I mean, or you like when you shoot a machine gun for the first couple of times, you're like, well, this is weird. I've got to do different things, I've got to keep the machine gun from going over my left shoulder.
Indeed.
Which seems useful.
At the time. Yes. And so there's so many of these paths to learning that internal knowledge, but I think that you make a really almost a good sales pitch that competition may be one of the most accessible and frankly attractive paths. So if a network member was ready to try competition, what do we recommend for them? I mean, common questions are, where do I find matches? What should I avoid? What should I seek out? What about my budget? All of these things.
Well, a couple of things. And Denise said, you be sure to remind Gila of this. So
okay, good.
She's in the other
Thank
office.
you, Denise.
The first thing, just tell yourself this. Regardless of the competition, whatever match you go to first, you're going to go, oh my dear Lord, I can't, who are these people? Good Lord. And it doesn't really matter what discipline it is. You go to a cowboy match, for example, and you see a guy all dressed up with chaps and everything and a big hat, and you're like, haha, that's really funny. And haha, he shoots 5 revolver shots, 5 more revolver shots, 10 rifle shots, 4 shotgun shots in 18 seconds. And then you go like, he doesn't look as funny as he did, like just before he started this run.
Yeah.
Or you go to a USPSA match and you see a grandmaster, and they don't live on a level you do.
Yeah.
It's like watching Rob Late. Again, I mentioned Rob. Rob and I are really good friends for so very.
Yeah.
And you watch Rob run a stage, and he's happy and kind of fun, and he's smiling, and he's grinning. He's exactly twice as fast as you are, and he dropped no points.
Yeah.
Okay. Or you go see an IDPA, a Bob Vogel, IDPA master from the very beginning, shoot, and you're like, I can't do that. I can't.
Yeah.
But you have to put that aside and say, there's a book. I can refer a book, right?
Yes.
George Leonard was the great American Aikido master, died a few years back. And he wrote a book called Mastery. And it was a book about how people learn. And absolutely brilliant book, because it's all human learning theory. And you can't beat that. But so what I would say to somebody is, okay, what's closest? Go to the websites for the various sports, USPSA, IDPA, maybe even cowboy. If you like old guns and you got a cowboy hat. I mean, I live in Colorado. Everybody has a cowboy hat here. But just you go and watch. And, when you're watching an 80-year-old grandmother moving through sequencing with cowboy guns, and she's as smooth as water, you go like, It turns out your ability to transition from this to that is not necessarily tied to age. It's tied to your eyesight. It's tied how you move. It's very. You can look at that and you go, I can do that. And if you want to start on something like Rimfire Challenge is really simple: 22 rifle and pistol, and you got to shoot some plates. The plates are never in another county. I think the farthest plate is like 18 yards for rifle. So basically your poodle could do it with a little work. And that way you'd really have one of Colonel Cooper's poodle shooters, wouldn't you?
There you go.
But even if it's just that, you go to a 22 match, and you don't look at the 11-year-old who smoked his father 25 times in a row. Instead, you like, can I do this? And say, with the rimfire thing, you don't have a holster. So you're all going from low ready. Pull up, bang, pull up, bang. And you do the things, and you just go through it. You say, I have a white belt. I'm starting out here. I'm an idiot. I'm going to get through. It's like three gun is a not. Don't, if you choose your first sport, don't choose three gun, because it's three guns. And that means that you have to practice thrice as hard. And three gun matches are, no matter what people say, there's probably people who told you, like, no, this isn't true. They're hard. They're seriously, honest to God, hard. Because so many things you have to think about. And you're transitioning between guns, and you're doing this. And then the rifle targets are in Cleveland. And it's like a 10-inch plate.
Yeah.
And since you're the last shooter of the day on that stage, the 10-inch plate has been hit 200 times, and it looks exactly like the dirt around it. And you're thinking, why didn't I have a bigger scope? All these things. I once saw a couple of shooters come out to a three-gun match I was shooting, and afterwards they knew me from television stuff, what we're talking. And they're like, we built these ARs based on what we read on the internet. And then we get out here, and none of you guys have ARs that look like this. Because we have learned what it takes to shoot this competition. And it's not what it says on Joe Bob's AR site.
Yeah.
It's like, I love aimpoint T2s as much as the next person, but if it's a 350-yard shot, it's a long way on that dot. Can you hit it? Yeah, you have to shoot it. But I know the people who can hit it with that dot, and it's not you.
Well, and you even come up to the budget question. I mean, I think three gun would be an incredibly expensive place to start.
It is.
Maybe we start at the Rimfire. Maybe we start at a simple local IDPA or ASA match.
And if you start at IDPA, you have to remember this: you can shoot the gun you carry. I would suggest a couple of things. It's like, well, I always carry appendix, right? Or I always carry 3 o'clock concealed. If you're going to shoot an IDPA match, what I would suggest is you pop for an outside the waistband Kydex holster, and you use those trashy vests that they use in IDPA. And everybody goes like, "That looks like a fishing vest." That's because it's mortise.
It
Yes,
is.
I have little hooks in it. But you want to, you say, "Well, I only want to train the way I is." That's good.
Mhm.
But first, when you go to a competition, the first thing you have to do is understand the rules. Generally, I think IDPA and USPSA are going to require you to do some kind of local safety class because they
Yes.
also want to know the rules. You want to know the
Mhm.
rules for doing this. And oh, by the way, there's going to be movement. Movement's going to require
Mhm.
you to do this. For example, they love that here, is start down range and back up. What do you want to do when you
Mhm.
back up? This. No, that's not good. It's not good. I saw a video of an instructor doing that 2 weeks ago. The instructor goes bang, bang, bang. And then as the instructor turns, there's like 5 people in front of the gun. It's
Hitting the
like,
ground. Yeah.
no, 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 that's not good.
Yeah.
But you have to, how do I back up? And the answer is carefully. But you
Hmm.
want to give yourself the ability to like start small and
Mhm.
say,
Yes.
I'm going to shoot this match. And yes, it's a concealed carry match. And yes, I got one of these cheesy vests. But the reason you're doing that is you're learning how to sweep the cover guard,
Mhm.
go to a firing grip on the gun, and safely bring that gun into play. Later, you can use your carry.
Yeah.
But first learn A, and then you can go to B, and then you can go to C.
Mhm.
Same with USPSA. It's just carry gear works fine in IDPA. Uh, if you want to play super games, you're gonna have to buy super gaming toys. There's a reason
Mhm.
golf clubs are expensive. Nobody ever
Yeah.
carves their own or anything. But you don't have to be there. You don't have to be
Right.
there. I spent 2 years shooting nothing but a Glock 19 and everything. I
Mhm.
shot it in IDPA, I shot it in USPSA, I shot it in training classes.
Mhm.
And did I win? Absolutely not. I didn't get the Cadillac. I didn't even get a Yugo. But I learned to shoot Glock 19 pretty well.
Yeah. And that was the point,
uh,
wasn't it?
that was the point, is that
Yeah.
I wanted to get something from the match. I
Mhm.
wanted to get something from the competition to make
Mhm.
me overall a better shooter. In terms of competition, don't spend anything until you've gone to a couple of matches with what you have.
There you go.
And
Yeah.
and one of the things I found in every competition, regardless of whichever one it was, the good shooters will help you. The good shooters will
Yes.
say, "I see," and you say, "This is only my second match. I just got my safety card," and
Mhm.
they're like, "Okay, well, couple of things. Don't listen to everybody." Denise said one other thing is that if you happen to be a girl and you go to a practical pistol match,
Mhm.
everyone is your friend. Every and 75% of what they take is wrong. So be careful with your friends. But people want to help,
Mhm.
especially in a
Yeah.
sport like three gun where it's just complicated as hell. They're like,
Mhm.
all right, let's talk about this. Maybe you should go here this way, this way, this way.
Mhm.
And it's useful. It's useful to watch other people on a stage. If on the very
Mhm.
first match you go to, and it doesn't matter if it's a Rimfire Challenge, Sporting Clays, Cowboy, whatever, and they say you shoot first, you say to them, "This is my first match. This is my second match. Could you please put me down in the rotation? I need to
Yes,
see how this
absolutely.
works." You never be
Yeah.
afraid of doing that,
Yeah.
and because everybody was at their first match, everybody went to their first match,
Mhm.
and they're all, "What's going on? Oh my
Yeah.
God!" So it's much better to let people settle, And we
Mhm.
every competition I've been in, we've worked hard with and for new shooters because
Mhm.
they're our life's blood that brings it in.
Hopefully, we can send some network members to those matches too, because I think that there is so much to be taken in, so many gifts, so much
Yes,
personal development, so much even just wow, I really did that. I mean the light bulb moments are endless, but you got
they
to put
are.
yourself out there.
You got to put yourself out there, and you have to make yourself receptive. You can't go to the match or go to any match and sit there and think, "God, I wish I could do better. God, I wish I could do better. God, no,
Oh,
no." Instead, it's like, I wonder what I can steal from this guy.
yeah,
I'm pretty sure I
yeah,
could crib something from. Why are
yeah,
they loading the way they're loading?
yeah.
Why are the gun and ammo on their belt in a certain way? You know, why,
Yeah.
weirdly, why are the magazines for the rifle in a certain position? Well, they're there because, and will it be the same for you? No. But at least you have a place to start.
There might be something very, very useful there. Well, you know what? I always learn something from you when we talk, several things generally. And that's what keeps bringing me back to MBTV on the radio podcast, because every week there's something crazy. There's some really interesting music. Oh my God, your music choices. Did I really say that? I'll have my guy edit that out.
Wait, no.
But
I mean, when was the last time you heard Robert Mitchum sing Thunder Road? I mean, honestly, you can't get that even on SAT radio,
no, your music choices are out of this world. But I always learn something. And I guess that what I'd really like to come out of this, in addition to go find a match and try it, is I'd like people to start listening to you, because I think you're the great underutilized resource. There's years and years of experience there, and fun, not just
Yeah.
luxury. So how do we learn more about your work, Michael? Where do we go?
It's really easy. michaelbain.tv. I do a weekly
Wonderful.
video, and a lot of times I have sponsors and I take care of them, but I just kind of drift through things. The weekly video is only like 8 or 9 minutes long. The podcast, bless its heart, this is its 21st year. It's now old
It
enough
is.
to drink and buy a car. It could check itself into the hospital if it wanted. But you could, I have maybe 25 different services, podcast services, that'll service the podcast to you. And I have people who, my joke is that if you've listened for 10 years, we can get you discount therapy. I can't help you. I can. It's 45 minutes a week, and it's 50 weeks a year, and I've been doing it for 21 years, which is enough BS just to go here to Mars.
Well, I would love to see members start learning from that, because you know what? If it's not fun, we don't do it. When it's fun, we keep coming back. And I think if there's one thing you bring to this, it's you help us have fun.
I mean, it should be fun. It should be fun. And I think if it's fun, you're more likely to continue doing it. I mean,
Yeah.
I certainly get the mentality that right now someone is training to kill you. And if you're not training at that same level, I get that. And there's been times in my life when I've been there. But it's like, no, mostly I like guns. Bang, I got to shoot them, and it's like, I'll get another one. I can shoot that. That's fun. And maybe there's a
And it
competition
keeps you
I can
coming
use
back.
that in.
Michael, it's been fun. Thank you so much for sharing this with us.